So one of the things that never meshes well with communism is food. That's why when you look at most communist countries over the years, the number one thing that people end up dying from is typically starvation. Like when you look at places like, for example, in North Korea, Venezuela, you know, and many of these countries that have gone that route, what happens is that production ends up slowing down. And of course, this has been tried numerous times to create this sort of utopian where everything is equal sort of lifestyle. And what happens is that other individuals just basically stop working because they say, hey, he's going to work, he's going to produce all the food, so I don't have to do anything. And of course, the government doesn't require me to do anything. They give me free money, right, in the form of some sort of welfare, whatever they want to call it, whether it's a child tax credit or just straight welfare or unemployment. It's all welfare. And so because you're allowed to utilize basically the currency, just nothing more than a coupon or something that you can use to redeem something else. Now, typically it's supposed to be a representation of your labor. An economy is made up of nothing more than goods and services. And so for me, I work as a nurse. I offer the service as a nurse to, manage people's healthcare. And so as a result, you earn a salary. Then, since you added basically to the pot, right? Basically like an old school potluck. So since everybody adds something, that's what allows everybody to kind of pick and choose what they wanted. Maybe you brought chicken, but you really weren't in the mood for chicken. You take fish or rice or whatever, right? So because everybody brings something to the table, that's what allows everybody to, in essence, to pick from the bag. That is basically what makes up an economy. Now, the reason that I bring this up is this most recently happened yesterday, where there was a press conference talking about how farmers were losing money. Now, none of this was covered or questioned in the sense that, well, why are farmers losing money? And when you look at the economy, over half of the food production goes to restaurants, right? And so many restaurants got closed and shuttered over 2020 and in parts of 2021 that a lot of the food that was made or planted or grown in terms of animals, etc., from last year, well, they didn't need that much this year. The reason being because all of these businesses closed. And so you have supermarkets and other areas where you saw price increases. Now, the farmers lost money because of simple supply and demand, right? So the farmers had too much supply of cows, chickens, turkeys, etc., right? Whatever it was that they were growing, they had an excess because of all the closures of the businesses, of all these other secondary businesses, caused farmers to lose money. Now, the manufacturers, or I should say the distributors, the people that package everything and then sell the meat, well, they didn't say, well, I'm going to buy everything that you made. They buy what they know that they can sell to the public. And so because of many of these businesses having, not enough employees, because some people didn't want to come to work, because of COVID, etc. So that causes wages to rise, production to slow down, and of course the business needs to stay in business. And because you still have a very high demand from the public because of basically what they refer to as the Biden bucks, right? Because of all the free money that the Biden administration was basically handing out to many of these individuals who were not working, because they were not, in essence, adding to the potluck, but they were still able to take from the potluck. Well, then what happens, right? I mean, if you were having a potluck among 5 people, but 10 people showed up and only 5 people brought food, what you're typically going to run into is a shortage. And that's basically what happened in the American economy this year, as well as a result of what happened last year. But none of this was covered in the press relief. They were talking about inequality and unfairness and how the farmers were losing out and the people who herd cattle, whatever, were losing out, but the butchers and the people who sold, typically the supermarkets, etc., these companies were making money. Like, for example, Tyson, because Tyson isn't the one that's out there growing the chickens. They're out there selling the chickens, cutting it up and selling it for distribution. And so they're only going to buy what they know that they can sell. It's not like the farmers. The farmers thought that they were going to have the same sort of need from like 2019 and 2020 and in 2021, and of course they didn't prepare accordingly. So this article, which talks about that, and the reason that I bring this up is because of the title of the article. As it says here, it says Biden administration plans tougher action to rein in meat prices. And when you see government get involved with price action in what should be a free market, is where shortages come. Because what happens is that as prices start to rise, well then the amount of food that can be distributed to individuals gets limited. It's limited by who can afford it. And so some people might not be able to afford red meat. Some people might be able to afford just chicken. Some people might be able to afford fish. Others might only be able to afford things like ground beef or pork, etc. Now, when the government gets involved, now the thing to look out for is what is spoken of course, in the article, where the administration, it says the Biden administration plans to take a tougher stance toward meatpacking companies, it says are causing sticker shock at grocery stores. Now, of course, the reason that you're seeing sticker prices at the grocery store is because everybody has money. You have everybody not working. There's a huge shortage everywhere across the country in terms of people who are out there working, and you have a huge number of people that are on, or that at least were on, unemployment. And so now you have all these people who have money, who can create demand, right? But then you have less people working, so what do? You have less supply. So when you have more demand than you do supply, simple economics is that prices rise. And so this is why individuals are seeing sticker shock outside of people not working, less production. When people become less productive, things become more expensive. If you've only got one doctor in your whole neighborhood, well, guess what? It's going to cost a lot to see that doctor, as opposed to having 10 or 20 or 30 doctors in an area where then supply and demand, I've got my choice. I can go wherever I want. I got a whole bunch of doctors in my area. You only got one in the area. Well, his time is money, and to see the patients that he can, he's going to impose higher prices to limit the amount of people who come into his office. That's just the way an economy works. And what happens is that then it pushes other individuals to go into that avenue of the economy, and then to cause growth within that economy, right? So instead of individuals going into meatpacking and expanding on meatpacking, right, to help bring the cost of living down, because people aren't working and the government was paying people to stay home, this is why you have an increase in prices. Now, where the government gets involved is where the food shortages will take place. There's 4 companies control much of the U.S. meat processing market, and top aides to President Joe Biden blamed those companies for rising prices in a blog on Wednesday. As part of a set of initiatives, the administration will funnel $1.4 billion in COVID pandemic stimulus money to small meat producers and workers. This is administrative aides said in the blog post. They also promised action to crack down on illegal price fixing. And this isn't illegal price fixing. This is just, in a free market, prices fluctuate. Prices do not remain stagnant in a free market due to supply and demand. It's not that difficult, right? If there's only so many women in your neighborhood, well, then the demand for a wife is going to be very high. And then the competition, of course, will be high as well among the men to, in essence, prove themselves to a woman to try to find a wife. And of course, the reverse is true. If you're the only guy, if you're the only well-to-do man in an area, well, then you're going to be highly sought after from the local women. It's just simple supply and demand. And of course, where government doesn't understand this, and is where they get involved, is where shortages will come into play. The reason being is because they'll start to regulate prices. And so when you regulate prices to keep prices low artificially, the only thing that will happen is now everybody will have access to food. Everybody will have access to food. Now you might think, well, that's a good thing. Everybody should have access to food. The problem is that the government will still give these individuals money, or they will artificially keep prices so low, but demand will still be high, but production remains low. And this happens all the time in communism, where people aren't working, either through stagflation, where you have high unemployment coupled with high inflation, or where individuals just aren't working because they were on some sort of pseudo welfare benefits. And so since individuals aren't working because maybe they don't like the wages that they're going to be getting for unskilled labor, this results in higher food prices, which results in food shortage. It's definitely something to keep an eye on moving forward if they do go this route. And of course, I'll leave the link for the article, you can read the rest of the article. But this is something definitely you want to keep in touch with, because once the government starts getting involved in fixing prices for food, this is typically where in communism you have food shortages, which is why it's important to have your own garden or to have chickens, etc. in your backyard if you have a little bit of land. Moving forward, it definitely going to be want to have your ability to grow your own food. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.